I'm a great believer that the process is the goal. And if you become excellent at applying a successful process, then at the end of the day, you're going to reach your objective. I never worried about, am I going to hit a certain revenue target, ever? Because I knew that we had developed a process that would help us meet those targets if we became experts at the process.
Can this really be a system for business success you can use to get clients now and generate more sales? I'm Ken Newhouse. Building a profitable business isn't only about generating leads and driving sales. It's about who we are and what we're made of. It's about finding the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others so you can succeed in business. If you're a member of the new breed of entrepreneur, I invite you to join the quest as we reveal the newest and most effective methods you can use to get clients now. In the epic poem of Don Juan, Lord Byron wrote, "A small drop of ink makes thousands, perhaps millions, think." And foremost in the thoughts of hundreds of thousands of coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, and professionals is the search for success in business. Today, in the heart of the new COVID economy, it's possible you're one of the thousands of individuals searching for a framework, a system you can use to reach your most pressing and important business goals. In spite of the challenges we're facing, you can make the decision to learn and deploy a system that can catapult you to amazing levels of success. Sadly, however, far too many will continue struggling, never obtaining what has been within their grasp, success that was theirs for the taking all along. Listen, we're all in business in pursuit of something. Could be money, could be position, prestige, could be some special achievement, could be the opportunity to be of service to others, could be lifestyle. Everybody's seeking lifestyle today. Could also be the ability to give unselfishly to friends, family members, even those in need. So each of us continually searches for some kind of fulfillment, searching for success in one form or another. You want to be happy. You want to be healthy. You want to be wealthy. You want to experience the true riches of life, desires shared by virtually everyone in business. And it's this inner urge which inspires you to take action. In spite of the new COVID economy, you and I have the same opportunities to succeed or fail as everyone else. And while the new COVID economy is a time filled with uncertainty, some are actually thriving, while others, sadly, have fallen by the wayside. Consider the age-old question: why does one person succeed in business and another fail? Like it or not, there's an answer to that question. But before we get to that answer, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that for some, their business failure has been entirely outside their control. But if your business hasn't been destroyed by one of the many draconian governmental shutdowns, you're in luck. Because there are formulas, rules, and principles, elements of a system, which some might call a treasure map, if you will, that when followed in proper sequence, can help you generate levels of success in your business that you never imagined possible. Now, one of the ironies of success in business is that the most effective and powerful rules of success are often so simple and obvious that they're difficult, if not impossible, to see. But the good news is that when you search for them, you can often find them. And on today's episode, we're going to cover several of those secrets, and something wonderful is going to happen. You're going to acquire knowledge. You're going to gain experience, albeit vicariously. You're going to become inspired. And then you're going to realize that finally, you're in possession of powerful business building secrets, necessary ingredients for your success in the heart of the new COVID economy. I'm Ken Newhouse, and I want to welcome you to episode 388 of the Get Clients Now podcast. My guest, Mike Darrington, is going to give you a recipe for business success, a hold you by the hand, just add water, paint by the numbers framework you can use to achieve levels of success in your business you never imagined possible. If you're going to deploy them effectively, you've got to make the decision to act on them so you can reap the benefits. That sounds great, right? You're going to deploy these and reap the benefits, but to actually deploy these secrets and reap these benefits, do it effectively, you've got to possess a burning desire, ambition, and you've got to have initiative. The challenges of the new COVID economy might have you asking, well, how do I develop ambition when I no longer feel ambitious? How do I develop initiative when I can't seem to find it right now? How do I motivate myself or another person to actually take action, meaningful action? If you've had those thoughts, you're not alone, because those questions are being asked by scores of coaches, consultants, and professionals. And the good news is that you're about to discover a system that's going to lead you down the path to success. A path that starts by developing a burning desire for the thing you want most. Now, if you're like me and if you're like my most successful clients, again, you're probably wondering, How do I create desire? How do I get started? The answers to those questions, they're going to become self-evident as you listen to today's conversation with Mike Darrington. Mike Darrington has amassed over 35 years of top-level business, entrepreneurial, and management success. Starting from an entry-level sales position, Darrington rose to the top of the C-suite in Ralston, Purina, and DuPont. Darrington eventually left the corporate world to start his own business where he built not one, but two multi-million-dollar companies from the ground up. Darrington attributes his success to following the system he reveals during our conversation. In addition to unparalleled business success, Darrington has worked with and created lifelong friendships with legends like Ozzie Smith, Tom Osborne, and the late John Wooden, the winningest coach in college basketball history. Darrington is also a renowned motivational speaker and platform salesman, having delivered presentations to hundreds of thousands of seminar attendees over the years. So if you're ready to discover the success system that never fails, let's welcome my guest, Mike Darrington, onto the show. All right, so Mike, it's really good to have you on the show today. So on behalf of myself and members of the Get Clients Now Nation, I'm going to welcome you. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Ken?
And just so you'll know, Mike is a dear friend of mine. It's a real honor for me that I can have Mike on the show, not only because of who he is as far as his character, but who he is as far as what he's accomplished in the business community over the last, 50 years, maybe 45 years. Would you say, Mike? Something like that?
Yeah, I'd say 40 years. Yeah, 45 years.
Mike, if you could, one of the first questions I like to ask all of my guests, and this is to give my listener kind of a good reference point from which they can start the conversation, follow along with us. If you could take 2 or 3 minutes, give us your backstory, kind of pick us up from that point up to the point where you are now so that my listener can, make sense of the interview we're having today.
Well, I was drafted in the 4th round by the California Angels in 1967. I went to Murray State University on a baseball scholarship, and I played 4 years at Murray State. We won 2 conference championships, I'm very proud to say. And I hurt my back when I was a junior in college. I had to take a summer elective, and I took gymnastics, and I fell off a trampoline and got what's called a spondylolisthesis in my 5th lumbar vertebrae. Obviously, I was very upset about that. The doctors told me I shouldn't play anymore. And when I went back to my apartment, I kind of tore up my apartment and had a very, very violent temper because I saw everything that I dreamed about going down the tubes. And I decided I needed some help. And unexpectedly, from that help, from that standpoint, I met a young lady who was standing out front in front of the student union one day with Campus Crusade for Christ. And she asked me a real pointed question. Do you think Jesus will return? And I snidely said, why do you think he'd want to return here? And I walked off very, very arrogantly and thought to myself, what if he does come back? And concurrent with that, I saw a big change in my brother, my older brother, who I idolized and who did pitch for the Washington Senators, by the way. I talked to him about it, and he said that, he had changed his life because of the Lord. I was looking for answers, Ken. I was looking for something to help me because I was so despondent over my baseball career now being over. And he asked me to go to church with him. So I went to church with him. I heard the gospel preached. Jesus died for your sins according to the scriptures, was buried and rose again the 3rd day according to the scriptures. And I'd never really heard that, and I never thought much about it. So I went 3 or 4 times and decided on about the 4th time to go forward at the end of the service and ask the Lord Jesus Christ to be my Savior. And I can tell you, through history and through business and through everything, that any accomplishments that I've had since that day, I know who's been behind it, and that's the Lord. And that's really a shortened rendition of my relationship with Jesus Christ. It really is the greatest decision that I've ever made.
Mike, I have to agree that's the greatest decision I've made. It's a decision I wish that all of my listeners would make. But from a business standpoint, take a minute or so, bring us up to speed. I know you were a VP at Ralston. I know you've worked at a lot of big corporations. You've held a lot of high positions in these corporations. Give us a quick rundown of some of those and bring us up to where you are now.
One of my first jobs out of college was selling surgical sutures. So I saw a lot of surgery, passed out the first time I saw surgery. Doctors made fun of me, of course. But I sold surgical sutures, and I did that for about 5 years. And I met a gentleman who taught me about self-image, who taught me a lot of things about the principles of success that I'd never realized. And after my jaunt with the suture industry, I went into personal consulting, and I've consulted with American Express, IDS, how to get salespeople and marketing people and R&D people to work together with you, et cetera. And I went into consulting for about 6 years and had a very good business. And then one of the executives of Ralston Purina was in Indianapolis one night, and he heard me speak. And I was giving what I call a success seminar that I'd put together over the years. And afterwards, I always greeted people, and he came by and he said, "Have you ever thought about maybe changing professions?" I said, "Well, it's all according to what the opportunity is." So he asked me to come into St. Louis. I was living in Indiana at the time, and I interviewed with some top executives at Ralston Purina and decided that I had the desire to do something differently. I had the ability to do it, and I had the opportunity to do it. So those three factors that I'd always looked at came into being at once. And I decided to take a position selling protein in their protein division. I rose to a director in 1987. Then I was director of North America food industry in 1991. Then I became a managing director of new ventures in 1997. I left, and that's when DuPont bought Ralston. I left DuPont in 2000, started my own sports nutrition business with powders and bars that I had help on at the University of Nebraska and some other places who really knew about nutrition. In 2007, I sold that business. And since I had left, they asked me to come back. Now, DuPont owned Ralston at the time. They asked me to come back because they were having some problems with top-line revenue. So I went back, and I went in as a senior director. And then, of course, eventually I ran all of North America. I actually ran NAFTA starting in 2012 for their newly acquired probiotics business and all their protein business. I retired from DuPont in 2017 and took a job with a small company in Owensboro, Kentucky called Hollison LLC, whose core competencies are number one, probiotics, and number two, contract manufacturing. So I'm executive vice president of that company, and we're doing very well, thank God. So that's where I am today.
So, Mike, what's something about you that people in the marketplace typically don't know about you? Maybe people even you work with, but you'd like them to know.
That's a great question. I think probably the answer to that would be over the years, Ken, I've written notebooks to myself, sort of self-help notebooks over the years. And I think I have 9 7x9 3-ring binders now full that I've written notebooks to myself on that are for me and to me. And I've got what I've learned over 40 or 50, just principles of success. I've got sections, principles of success I've come to embrace over the years, my self-image, effective speaking. I've got a whole notebook on effective speaking. I've got even a page in there on what I'm thankful for, and I add to it every year. I was up to 44 things 2 weeks ago when I looked at it, and I'm adding to that daily. What my life goals are, my key learnings in life, famous quotes, how I'm living out my life goals, leadership, multiple Bible doctrine, 45-minute talks. I've got 3 or 4 different success seminars that I've sort of mastered over the years. And then notable people I've talked with or have had friendships over the years. So I've got 9 of those notebooks. And the interesting thing, Ken, is the reason that I've written down what my goals in life are and how I'm going to reach the goals, and then how I'm progressing against those goals, and then other topics, is because when I get tired or I get down because of certain issues in life, which we all have, I go back to those notebooks and look what I've written over the last 45 years and refocus myself on those things that are really important in life. And I can tell you the real important things in life are relationships. And the real important things in life get down to one thing: my relationship with the Lord. And if my relationship with the Lord is good, I know it. And if it's not good, I also know it. So I write them down so I have a history of what I want, what I've done, and what the Lord has accomplished by His will and by His love and grace through my life.
You know, that whole concept, Mike, speaking as a believer who works with a lot of people who don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I don't want to make the whole show about, I certainly want to encourage you to share, and I appreciate that, and that's one of the reasons I had you on, because I wanted to talk about this. But I think a lot of listeners either have no idea what we're talking about, maybe they go to church or whatever, and they're just unsure. But yes, you can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It will transform your life. And so what Mike is talking about is he comes from the belief, as do I, and it's biblical, that all of the good things in life, all the challenges we have in life, have to pass through the Lord's hands in order for those things to take place. And so whether it's success or failure, we have to understand that it's part of our development and growth to become more like Jesus in the process. Having said that, if we can set that aside for just a second, maybe a person's listening and they're like, that's great. I don't really care about that. Well, that's to their loss. But from a business standpoint, you have accomplished a tremendous, tremendous amount. As an example, Ozzie Smith, actually was the highest paid baseball player, first person to ever reach $1 million a year in baseball, if that'll take you back, played for the St. Louis Cardinals, all-star shortstop. His only home run in one season, won one of the games. I don't know if it was a playoff or World Series. Jack Buck called that home run. He was on your board of directors for the company that you own. So John Wooden.
Johnny Wooden.
Yeah, you've just dealt with a lot of very famous, very, very successful people over time. And my question to you is, if you could take a minute or so, how did all this start? What happened to you? You and I understand that the Lord gives us all good things. The Bible says that all good and perfect gifts come from Father of Lights, our Heavenly Father. But from a business perspective, maybe a person doesn't know that or doesn't understand that or doesn't even believe that. From a business perspective, how did all this start, this road to success that you've had?
Well, that's another great question. One of the things that I believe, Ken, is that there are natural laws. So if a person is listening and they're not a believer, they can still have success in life if they know what attractive success is and they stick with it. Okay, so this is not you and I are great friends, and this is not a Bible show. But in 1986, we had a director of marketing at Ralston who was a University of Nebraska graduate, and she was president of the Midwestern American Marketing Association. They happened to have their meeting up in Lincoln, Nebraska that year. She said, would you please come in and give a talk to these folks? And, we agreed to what the agenda would be and what the talk would be. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you'll introduce me to Boyd Epley and Tom Osborne while I'm there. Boyd Epley was the guru of strength training in the collegiate ranks at the time. And of course, Tom Osborne is noted to be one of the greatest college football coaches and a really great Christian man at the same time. So she said, I'll do it. She said, I know him. So I went up, gave the talk. She took me over to the stadium. I met Boyd Epley. I met Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne, as a matter of fact, I've got letters from him. I got one in my office here that I framed on the friendship that we've held over the years. And I met a young man named David Ellis. And David Ellis was at University of Nebraska. He was a graduate assistant, and he was in nutrition. He had Tom Osborne's ear, and he had the athletic staff's ear. He had the physician's ears. And I worked with Dave, with Ralston, over 6 or 7 years to develop some energy bars for the University of Nebraska. And those energy bars were mostly complex carbohydrates with a little bit of protein. But they wanted something that they could have a halftime snack on. And we developed this concept around energy. And then Dave took that concept around energy and built a whole manual around what he called fueling tactics. And today, David Ellis is one of the most recognized nutritionists in the world and a very, very dear friend of mine. He has been for years. But he said, have you ever talked to Mackie Shellstone? And I said, well, I know who Mackie Shellstone is. Mackie trained, a lot of great athletes. And he said, well, you might want to talk to Mackie. He's got some great ideas on nutrition too. So Mackie, who's down in New Orleans, introduced me to Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith was one of his clients. And I said, Mackie, I'm going to put together a company, and I'd like for you and Mackie and then Mark Laton, who was also, Mark Laton at the time was director of the Baseball Umpires Association. I said, I'd like for you to be on my board of directors. And I think we've got a good thing here. We got a good supplement. We've got excellent bars. They've been tested. And that's how I met Ozzie, was through Mackie Shellstone. And then Ozzie and I became friends over time. And he was on my board of directors for 4 or 5 years. But that's how I met Ozzie Smith. And he's a great, great individual. He's got his own business now, probably the greatest shortstop I've ever seen. That's kind of a long-winded session on how I got to meet Ozzie Smith. But on Johnny Wooden, I got on a flight in 1995 from LA to St. Louis. And so I was in the very front row in the middle, and I walked on with my bag, and I looked at my ticket, and I said, there's John Wooden sitting next to me. I can't believe this. And so I put my bag up, I sat down, I pretended to read the newspaper, and all I was thinking about was, how do I start a conversation with the greatest college basketball coach in history? How do I do this? And I said, Coach Wooden, I know that everybody wants to talk to you and everything, but I just wanted you to know that I'm an Indiana boy too. I grew up in Evansville, Indiana. And I just wanted to say hi to you and tell you how much I admire what you've done for the sport of college basketball. Well, he put down his newspaper, and that led to a 4-hour conversation. And the thing that you do with John Wooden is you listen, you don't talk. You ask a question and then you listen. And he gave me a lot of key learnings in life. He said that he was from Indiana, which I knew. He was from Martinsville, Indiana. I went to Purdue University, was an All-American there. Eventually got to UCLA and coached. He is a salesman. He was such a great salesman. He said, you're from Evansville, Indiana. He goes, where'd you go to school? And I told him in high school. And he said, do you know Herman Byers? Well, Herman Byers was my football coach in high school. And he's an icon in the state of Indiana. And he said, yeah, I've known Herman for years. And I said, well, Coach, I said, tell me about some of your philosophy about your pyramid. And he told me, and I've got this written down to this day, he said, you have to understand that people will make mistakes. And this doesn't make any difference if you're a Christian or you're a non-Christian or you're just a business person. People will make mistakes. But if you're not, then you're not doing anything. And he said, game time is for fun. He said, we practice during the week. I'm hard on the players, but game time's fun for them. And I remember, and you might too, Ken, watching John Wooden on the sidelines. He always had a rolled up program and he sat there and he watched. And he never really coached a lot during a game. And I think that that's one of the great, great principles of success. Is if you're going to be successful, you've got to practice what you're going to say. And you've got to get down and understand exactly what you're going to say, what it means, and what value that is. That's what John Wooden taught me. And he said, Mike, perspective is what other people think of you. And he said, but character is who you are. And he said, when you're in a hotel room by yourself, are you the same person that you're going to portray in public? That's how I met John Wooden. I'm very grateful for that because he gave me a lot of notes for my notebook. But he was a great man.
You and I talked because the beautiful and talented Lisa, is obviously my wife. Her uncle was the assistant coach with John Wooden. I remember talking to him a little bit about it. I've only met him, I think, twice when we used to live up in Portland. But anyway, some just amazing stories. But Mike, what I want to focus on as far as the business element of the show today is process. You're a guy who's real big on process. And in the course of our conversations, you have revealed to me a process that I think is, on its face, it could be perceived as being overly simple. But when you get down to it, people who would look at it and say, hey, that's overly simple, everybody knows that. But at the same time, they're not following it and they're not benefiting from it. So if you could, from a 30,000-foot view, let's start to dive into that process. And then as we go, we'll peel the onion back and get into a little more detail. I'm being sensitive of our time as well. But what are 2 or 3 big benefits from a 30,000-foot view that my listener can expect from using the formula we're about to uncover? Take about 3 minutes, maybe 4 tops.
Okay, one of the things that I've learned over the last 45 years in business and industry is people make things too complicated. And it's my belief and many people's belief, the most successful college football coach in the last 50 years believes this, whether you're a Bama fan or not, doesn't make any difference, but Nick Saban is eminently successful. I've always believed and taught, when I used to set budgets, let's say I set a budget for you for $25 million worth of new sales in fiscal 2021.
I could easily achieve that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You probably could, but I'd still go through the process. I'm a great believer that the process is the goal. And if you become excellent at applying a successful process, then at the end of the day, you're going to reach your objective. I never worried about, am I going to hit a certain revenue target ever? Because I knew that we had developed a process that would help us meet those targets if we became experts at the process. Now, saying that, I've got a good friend who just had some very invasive hip surgery. And I talked with him a couple of days ago, and he was kind of down in the dumps. And I said, well, what's the process? What process are you involved in? And he said, well, I've got to do this, 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 and this. I said, what happens if you do this, 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 and this? He goes, well, I guess I'll be healed. I said, then what you want to become is an expert at the process. Do those things that you need to do on a daily basis. I don't care how mundane you think they are. I don't care how trite you think they are. You must do these things daily to reach your end objective. So I've always believed that corporations are much too complicated, and you need to simplify and give salespeople and marketing people and R&D people a process whereby they can team and align quickly to deliver value to the end customer. And if we can get them to align quickly, then we can convert projects more quickly than competition. And that's the name of the game. So I developed this with help from the gentleman I talked about earlier in 1975. And I haven't changed it one bit. And when I walk into a company and I talk to them about process and I talk to them about this process, they're amazed because it's simple and it gives them a trackable, measure specific action plan in which not only to implement, but also to look at performance plans. They can measure performance plans. They can measure where they are on projects, etc.
So let's do this. Let's peel back the onion. The formula is D as in dog, P as in Paul, L as in Larry, N as in November. But let's go through that. So the first, what I want to do is I have a style of questions. Typically, I refer to these as rapid fire bullets. But if you could, being sensitive on timing again, because I know we have a hard break, I want you to go through these maximum 3 minutes per, which will allow me to get to that last question. So let's start with the first one. All I'm going to do is give you a word as part of your formula, and you're going to expound on it. So the first part of your formula is the D for decide. Go.
You have to decide what you want. And if you can't decide what you want, even if a person would come up on the street and give it to you, you wouldn't recognize it because you haven't decided what you want. So number one, you have to decide what you want and write it down. And the reason you write it down is so you always have a focal point on what you've decided your objective is. And very clearly, psychologists will tell you this. If you have an objective and if you have a dream and you have a desire, you write it down so you can focus on it, and then you can play with that desire and you can make notes on that desire as you go. So number one, decide what you want.
So with respect to making the decision, what about the person who says, well, what if I want this and it's not a clear-cut decision? How would you proceed?
Here's what Dale Carnegie taught me. Dale Carnegie taught me, when you have a problem or you can't decide on something, get a piece of paper and on the left, put down all the reasons I should do this. And on the right, put down all the reasons I shouldn't do this. And then after you make a decision on should I do this or shouldn't I do this, then put down a timeline. I'm going to do this because of X, Y, Z. And starting on January the 1st, 2021, I'm going to implement my decision. Look at it this way. Dale Carnegie was one of the brightest men, one of the most practical, brightest men I've ever read. And he said, when you have a decision, write the problem down and then write down why I should do it and why I shouldn't do it. Then also you've got to let a little bit of your gut take over too. You can't just do it based on, if you have 6 do's and 7 no do's, don't just go to the 7 no do's because there are 7 and there are only 6 do's. And that's a very practical way to look at things. All right. And then, look at the environment, look at the circumstances that you're in. I really believe that the outer world of circumstances can be changed and controlled by our inner world of thought. But it's how we perceive things and it's how we look at things. So that's decide what you want. And if you can't decide what you want, then there's no reason to make a workable plan for its attainment.
All right, so let's talk about plan.
Okay, Pete. To design a definite plan is probably the most important facet of this, because your plan is your process. And the process to achieve what you decide you want is extremely, extremely important. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a plan. I need to do this, 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 and this. And the first thing that happens is there's going to be a problem with the plan, or something's going to come up, or something that you didn't realize was going to come up comes up. But your behavior has to be consistent with what you've decided to do and maintain that behavior. And if problems come up, then the plan should work out those problems. But here's what happens. People write a plan and they look at it and they say, man, this is the greatest plan I've ever seen in my life. We can do this. And then a problem happens. What do they do to the plan? They scrap it. Don't scrap it. Continue with the plan. If it's a workable plan and you know that the plan will help you achieve your objective, stay with the plan. And as issues come up, let the plan deal with that.
The next bullet is L for listen to the experts. Go.
Listen to the experts. Now, I've spent probably 15 minutes today talking about experts in their field that I've learned from over the last 45 years. And these people have been there and they've done it. If I were going to set up a basketball clinic, John Wooden, unfortunately, has passed away, but I would get John Wooden or a protege. If I were going to set up a shortstop clinic or a baseball clinic, I certainly wouldn't go to myself because, I can barely walk at my age. But there are experts that can help you. There are experts in the field of management, in the field of marketing, in the field of advertising that can help. And most people, everyone has the internet. And I just did it this morning before we came on. I looked up who are the most influential people in sales, in direct sales in the last 60 years. And that's all you got to put in. And you can find who those influencers are and who those leaders are and who those experts are. And believe it or not, I found out if on thought process, if you want to read someone who has an excellent thought process on selling and get past all of the hype and all the hyperbole, get past all that, but just read the context, you can learn a lot from a guy named Napoleon Hill. Believe it or not, you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot from a guy named Glenn W. Turner. So there's no shortage of experts that you can listen to and take advice from and model yourself after in the field. And I don't care what field it is, it doesn't make any difference. I don't care if it's marketing or advertising and promotion. You say, well, I don't know how much to spend on my A&P budget. Well, look up like companies and see what they spend at their pro formas and see what they spend on advertising and promotion. So the information world right now is so phenomenal. And it wasn't like that 40 years ago. Okay. You almost had to meet people and find books to read to even get any information. But today it's different.
All right, Mike, let's cover the last element in the framework, in the formula, which is N. Don't take no for an answer. Go.
I don't take no for an answer because I believe that what I have is of too much value and can literally change people's perspective of life. Instead of looking at poverty and misery and defeat, why not look at and pursue success and happiness and those things that everyone wants out of life? And if a person says no, then that's probably my fault because I haven't given them the reasons and the value why they should buy from me. I'll give you a classic example. An example is I heard a story about 15 years ago, and everybody knows this story. When I was a little kid, my dad bought me a bicycle, and the bicycle, he could have gotten a Schwinn and it would have cost like $20, but he got an off brand, looked good, everything for $15. So when you look at buying something of value, there's a difference between price and cost. And price is what you pay for it, but cost in the end is what it's going to cost you. And I can remember riding the bicycle, the cheap bicycle, and the chain fell off. Well, now you got to put the chain back on. Well, that cost in those days $1.50 to do that. Then the front tire went flat. Then the fender fell off. And I think by the end of the time, if dad would have invested the $20 instead of the $15 up front, then he wouldn't have spent the $40. He ended up trying to fix that bicycle that he spent $15 on. So that's why I don't take no for an answer, because there's always a reason to do something if you believe it down in your very being. And if you can deliver the value, I don't believe a person can say no. And I don't take no for an answer. Now, you don't have to be a drum beater when a person says, no, I'm just not ready. Look, some people may not have the money. They may not be in position to do anything right now, or they may put it on the back burner. In those cases, there are legitimate reasons that people can't buy or people can't do something now. And that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, we're dealing with that, the new COVID economy.
Absolutely. And you can see with all the restaurants across the United States being closed down, with people's livelihoods, the American livelihoods at risk right now, there are people who are banding together legitimately and not taking no for an answer. I wouldn't say that you do that out front of a company you're trying to sell, but at the same time, no is a perspective, all right? Because we give up too easily. And the reason I put no in this track of success is don't give up so easily. There are so many ways to deliver value. If a person says no, there's something they're not understanding or something that you're not articulating to give them that impetus to buy.
Mike, what's the one question that I didn't ask today that I should have asked you?
Ken, I think you asked the appropriate questions. I think maybe I spoke a little bit too long. I think one of the questions is, how do you view the real characteristics of leadership? There are many facets to it. Number one is a leader has to have staying power. He can't throw in the towel like the no. When we got to no, he can't throw in the towel at the first sign of adversity. Number two, he needs to have a dynamic private life. He needs to develop relationships with all of his children, with everybody in the family. Number three, he needs to be self-controlled. You can't have a leadership that's totally out of control. He can't be a waster of time. He has to be a consistent model or example. He has to have strong resistance quality. Because I'll tell you what, Ken, the first person who will be shocked out of their mind when you become successful is your mother-in-law. So you have to have great resistance quality. A leader is a servant. A leader must be willing to intern. And I think that that's what a lot of leaders don't do. They're not willing to intern. And then under that, under those 8 or 9 bullet points, I talk about some things. But I think characteristics of leadership, and that's a whole show.
Yeah, it is.
A leader never quits, because in many ways, the world still loves a plotter. Is the person going to reach the finish line? And I learned this by example. When I was in high school, one of my best friends was at that time, it was called the mile race. And it was the quarterfinals before you went to the state. And there were 7 or 8 guys lined up, and the gun goes off, and so they go around the track. It was 4 times around a quarter-mile track. He fell at the half mile. He fell. And those were cinder tracks in those days. And he really bloodied up his knee. He fell, and he kind of bloodied up his face because his face kind of hit the cinders. And he was actually lapped. He got up and he started to run again, Ken. And he kept running, albeit at a slower speed. But when the race was finally over, he still had a lap to go. And my friend went all the way around that 4th lap and finished. And when he finished, people in the stands gave him a standing ovation because he finished the race. And that's one of the great qualities of leadership.
Now, as I mentioned at the conclusion of last week's episode with Dr. Eric Klum, delivering consistent, memorable experience for your clients is mandatory to your success. Achieving this level of customer service in your business requires a system. And during the course of the conversation today with Mike Tarrington, you learned about the system of success that never fails. You learned that having systems in place in your business can be the key to get you through the tough times and the catalyst to skyrocket your business during the good times. Over the last 4 years, we've had many conversations about how you can use systems to get clients now, increase sales, and grow your business. A great episode that comes to mind is number 382, Learn how to create a professional bio and overhaul the embarrassingly ineffective version you have that's preventing you from getting new clients. Nancy Juetten, author of the #1 bestseller, Bye Bye Boring Bio, reveals the system for writing a bio that attracts more leads and generates more sales. Episode 382 is where you can find details for that. I'd also recommend episode 379. When you want new clients, do you think like a marketer? Does the ROI your business generates from your marketing efforts embarrass and frustrate you? Best-selling author and CEO of Silvertree Communications, Kate Colbert, reveals why the marketing campaigns of some business owners who know next to nothing about marketing but use a proven marketing system almost always produce huge returns. Episode 379 for that. Both of those conversations you can find on the KenNewhouse.com website. And just like with last week's wrap-up, I'm going to actually go a bit short, so I'm getting ready to head out of town for the Christmas and New Year's holiday. But before wrapping up, I want to quickly mention that we're in the process of creating a free membership for you where you're going to be able to access the entire library of conversations searchable by topic since 2017. When you become a member on kennewhouse.com, you'll have instant access to my own personal library, the book notes, and the highlights I've captured from that week's guest and their book, their work, their marketing system, whatever it might be, coaching program. You'll also have access to the other books that I featured on the show for the last few years, plus access to a weekly strategy guide that'll come into your inbox every Wednesday. The guide will feature all the links we've mentioned on every show that links to books, resources, also other podcast episodes, as well as the most effective strategy we covered on that week's episode. Additionally, the guide will contain other articles online that I found that I think will be useful to you. So be sure to listen for the announcement when we launch the new free membership portal we're creating for you on kennewhouse.com. And in addition to all that I've mentioned, remember, the first 100 subscribers who sign up for the free membership on kennewhouse.com, well, you're going to get a free digital copy of the updated version of my book, Profitable Again, as well as a copy of my newest book, Profitable Podcast Blueprint, which should be out within the next 7 to 10 days. And speaking of incredible content like I've got on kennewhouse.com, next week I'm having a conversation with Melanie Diesel, CEO of StoryFuel and author of the Content Fuel Framework, the #1, as in selling the most copies, content creation book on Amazon in all of 2020, which is saying a lot. Not just someone who's claiming to have the #1 bestseller. This is a documented, provable #1, as in sold the most copy book on all of Amazon in this particular niche. And as you're going to discover during my conversation with Melanie next week, anyone can generate content ideas quickly and easily if they have the right framework. And that's exactly what she's going to give you next week. Her very own time-tested framework for thinking of and creating content ideas, 100 or more content ideas at a time. She's also going to give you a handy list of subcategories that you can use to guide your brainstorms no matter what type of content you want to create. So you may be wondering, who is Melanie Diesel? Well, Melanie began her career at the Huffington Post. Then she moved to Time Magazine, then on to the New York Times, where she became the youngest person in history to head up the content creation department at the New York Times. So join me for a conversation next week with my guest, Melanie Diesel, where we discuss the amazing content creation framework she's created and how you can use this powerful tool to get clients now and make your business more profitable in the heart of the new COVID economy. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Monday on the show.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.